Stanford University.
Okay, well, welcome to lecture number 18 of CS193P, fall 2013-14. Before I talk about what I'm going to talk about today, let's talk a little bit about what's coming up because we're right at the end of the quarter here. So on Wednesday, next lecture, we are going to have this alternate final presentation day. And a few of you have already said that you wanted to do that. And really, the only thing you need to do to sign up to do that, if you want to use this Wednesday as opposed to the following Thursday normal final presentation time to do your presentation, is to submit the keynote slides, okay, by tomorrow at noon. That's very important. If I don't see your slides by tomorrow at noon, then you basically are not going to be presenting on Wednesday, and then you will be forced to submit next, or to present next Thursday. So the only thing I'll say about your keynote slides, make sure that they're widescreen format. Okay, 1280 by 720. If you are submitting PowerPoint or something else, you know, you're taking your chances because I'm going to convert them to Keynote. So if the fonts and stuff convert, then you're in good shape. If not, you know, your slides might look a little wonky. You just submit them normally, right? Just do the normal class submit script. You submit it as your final project, and of course you can submit again all the way up until the deadline. And the other thing we're going to do on Wednesday, after we have a few people, you know, do their final presentations, which, by the way, I, you know, really encourage all of you to come and be an audience for those people. Just because you'll get to see some final presentations, you'll get a little bit of bonus. I'll talk a little bit about the final presentations. If I see something, I'm like, oh, let's make sure that this doesn't happen next Thursday or whatever. Also, after that's done, if you're planning to do a live demo, Wednesday will be a great time because I'll have this whole setup here, and you can try and hook up your device and using this wireless thing that I use, and this thing right here, which let me set that up. To show your demo and make sure that it's working, make sure your device works, all that stuff, so that you can have a nice smooth demo. Okay, so we'll be doing all that on Wednesday. Otherwise, I'm not going to present a particular topic. So it's one of those things where, again, I encourage you to come to be an audience for the people who are doing the alternate presentation, but it's not mandatory. I mean, all these lectures at the end here are not mandatory per se, but that's what's going on Wednesday. Okay, any questions about that? All right, and then Friday, no section on Friday. I think it might even be officially start of the final exam period on Friday. I'm not 100% sure, but in any case, no section. We've moved your project deadline, as you know, to Sunday night at midnight. And when you submit your final project, submit your slides, okay? Assuming you're not submitting them by noon tomorrow, make sure you submit them by Sunday night. And just put them right at the top level of whatever you submit. Just whatever the top level directory is, just put them there, keynote slides. The final presentations are a week from Thursday. This is the normally scheduled final exam period for this class, 12:15 to 3:15. The presentation is required. Some people say it was an optional. No, it's required. You get 2.5 minutes this quarter, which is a long time. Usually we only get 2 minutes. And it seems like a long time. When you get up there, it'll seem short. But, and again, widescreen aspect ratio. And the order is going to be random. You're not going to find out till the day you get it. So don't even send me something that says, oh, I got a flight to catch, so let me go first. Okay, if you got a flight to catch, then go on Wednesday. Okay, go the day after tomorrow. Because for fairness, I'm going to put it in a random order that will be revealed at the beginning. Okay. Any questions about that? Or about any questions about the final project submission process or due date, Sunday night? Okay, excellent. So today's topics, 2 topics, localization, really it's internationalization that I'm going to be talking about, and then settings, which is a UI, you can add UI to the settings application to control certain settings about your application. And the 2 demos I'm going to do, I'm going to internationalize Photomania, and I'm going to add a setting to Bouncer. Okay, that way we'll get both of these things demoed. All right, so let's talk about internationalization. There's really 2 steps to internationalization. There's something we call internationalization, sometimes abbreviated I-18N because there's 18 letters in there, I-18N, internationalization. And then there's localization. Internationalization is the process of making your app possible to be localized, okay, making it so that your app can be shipped in multiple different languages. Localization is the process of actually translating your application to another language. Okay, so it's really a two-step process. Internationalization, that's something you do as the developer. Localization, usually you hire someone to go do that. I don't recommend using Google Translate to localize your app. You get some pretty strange results. You want a professional localizer who understands the idioms of the local language. There's really two things that need to be localized. One is your storyboard, and one is kind of all the literal strings in your application. So let's talk about the storyboards first. The way we localize storyboards in iOS 7 is we only change the strings that appear in the storyboard, and we let auto layout resize things to fit wider and shorter strings. Okay, that's a great side benefit of having auto layout, is that localization now is just about the strings when it comes to the storyboard. But the first thing we need to do before we do any localization is to go to our project settings and set the list of all the languages that we are going to support localization for. Okay, so as you release new versions of your app, you'll support a few more languages. You'll go back to this project settings and add more languages. One thing that's a little tricky about this is you're used to going to your project settings, which is that upper left-hand top part of the navigator. But actually what we've been setting the settings of there is the target, the app that you're building. Here you want to actually set the settings of the project itself. So you can see where that little bubble points to right there that says Photomania. That's a little pop-up. Actually, you're going to click that and switch up to editing the project. And when you do, there's not a lot of settings for the whole project. You're seeing them all right here. And you're just going to go down to the bottom there. It says localizations. It's just a list of languages. These are pre-supported languages because these languages need to match up with the languages that the operating system, iOS, supports, so that when people go to settings and other apps, that's in whatever language as well. So when you hit that little plus button down in the lower left-hand corner, it's going to be a pop-up with a list of languages. You're not going to just type in the word Arabic or French. It's going to be something you're going to pick from a list of supported languages for iOS. And you can also see that there's a language there called base, right? And there's a switch that says use base internationalization. The concept of base internationalization is that there's going to be a localization. It's not a localization that is in anybody's language. It's just the base localization. And that's going to be kind of like all the defaults. The default storyboard strings, default strings throughout your app are going to come out of the base localization. And then all these other localizations, like English even, but French and German and whatever, those are going to modify those strings. And so if you forget to localize a string, the base localization will shine through. Okay? And so we'll see what that looks like when it comes to storyboards in a second here. So the storyboards look like this. You select a storyboard, and when you do the thing I showed you on the previous slide, then your storyboards are going to look like this in the file navigator. You see how there's main iPhone storyboard, and now it has a little triangle that you can click, and it now is showing underneath it main iPhone storyboard again, base, so that's your base storyboard. And then for French, it says main iPhone.strings. So that's just the strings only for the storyboard. They've been extracted. Okay, when we did that previous thing, it extracted those out there. And when you click on the storyboard, if you go to the file inspector, you can see this little thing showing there where there's base. There will always be base, and then however many languages you want to translate to. Now here, notice that English is not even checked. That's because I'm going to assume that my base is English. Okay, now you don't always want to assume that, and you could even mostly assume that, but still have an English.strings file that changed a couple of things if you wanted, or you could have the whole thing be, explicitly in a strings file for English. But here I have not even checked English, so whatever's in my base storyboard, that's what's going to ship when I'm in the language English. But in French, I have the localizable.strings file, which I'll show you in a second, which is going to change all the strings in my storyboard. So what does that look like? The French language strings. I'm going to postpone showing what that looks like until we talk about strings in general. And so let's talk about literal strings. So the storyboard strings are going to be in this thing I showed you in the last slide. But there's other strings inside your app that aren't in the storyboard, like things that come up in alert messages, the alert buttons, all those things are not in your storyboard, but they need to be localized as well. And the way we get those strings to be localizable is using this macros here that start with NS localized string. So there's NS localized string with default value, there's NS localized string from table, there's NS localized string. And each of these macros takes a little bit different arguments, but the main thing they're doing is you're giving a key that's going to be looked up in a strings file, and it's going to return a value. The different variants just determine what's the default value if I can't find the thing in the string, and which .strings file am I going to look in. Okay, for our storyboard, there's always one string file associated, but when we have literal strings inside of our code, we could split up all the translations into different files if we want. And in the demo, I'll do that. I'll put them in a little separate file just for one view controller. So for example, if you had the literal string hello at sign quote hello in your app, and that is going to appear in the UI, then you would change that to NS localized string at hello, comma, and then the last argument there is a comment to the localizers. Okay? So you can assume the localizers speak your language, whatever your base language is, and you're giving them a comment. You're telling them, what is this hello? Where does it appear? What's its environment? So here I'm saying it's a greeting at the start of the application, so the person would know in French to make that be bonjour or whatever, right? So, so that's how you do. You change all your literal strings to these NS localized string, one of these variants. Now, what are these things actually doing, these NS localized string? They're actually calling a method in NS bundle. Okay, NS bundle is a class that kind of collects everything about your app, okay, into an API for accessing the resources of it. And we can use it to access strings files, and we do that with this method in bundle called localized string for key value table. Right, exactly what you would think. Key is what we're looking up in the strings files, value is the default value there, and table is which table to look in. The bundle can also be used, by the way, to find URLs to resources like images, things like that. If you drag an image, a JPEG image, right into the top level of your navigator, then you can use NS bundle main bundle. There's something called URL for resource, and you give it the name of that JPEG file, it'll give you a URL to it. Sometimes you need a full URL to some image, or if you're not using image named, you need some full URL. So NS bundle is a class for you to kind of understand a little bit as well. But we don't usually, well, sometimes we'll call this localized string for key, and I'll do it in the demo as well. But when we can use the macros, we should. But there's a significant limitation on those macros, the NS localized string. All the arguments have to be literal strings, including the comment, the key, the value, the table name, etc. They can't be variables. They have to be literal string, @ quote something, @ quote something for every argument of those localized strings. And let's talk about why that is. The answer for that is there's a command line utility called genStrings, short for generate strings, which will look through a .m file for all those NS localized string macros and extract them all out into a strings file for you. Okay? And that's how you get the base string file that you will then localize to other languages. Okay, and we'll show this in the demo as well. And so, for example, we had that NS localized string @ hello, greeting at start of application. That would get turned into those following two lines there in a strings file. Comment, greeting at start of application, and then hello equals hello. And the French person would come along, and they would change hello equals bonjour. Now, when you do gen strings and you get .strings files generated, and you might get multiple of them, because remember, one of the NS localized strings is NS localized string from table, so you might specify a table name, and so it might be making multiple .strings files for you. You just take those .strings files, drag them into your application, into your Xcode project, and then inspect them with the file inspector. And when you do, you're going to see this button, the top button.